I want to welcome you to distance counseling, distance education, and distance supervision, legal and ethical duties. My name is Dr. Dustin Herbert Reed, and I am a part-time assistant professor in the clinical mental health counseling program at National University. I teach students online, and I do have mentorships online, and I am one of MBCC's 2022 recipients of the telehealth provider award for training in that area. I have been presenting on this subject since 2017. It is a passion of mine, and for my own accessibility needs, I will be turning my cam off while I present. I thank you for that understanding. And I hope that you enjoy this presentation. It is a pleasure and honor to be here. I am also the current ARCA treasurer, 2023 to 2026. If you have not met me or seen me on the website, it is an honor to be your treasurer. I have also served as the Midwest representative for a term prior to this. So there is a little bit about me. I do have a background in rehabilitation counseling, even though I have taught students in clinical mental health, do teach students in health, school counseling, different areas. Without further ado, let me go ahead and minimize and turn off my screen or video. So, looking at the learning objectives, we will be exploring 3 different areas. We're going to explore areas pertaining to the use of technology in distance education and supervision and counselor education, ethics, and laws associated. We will explore knowledge pertaining to use of technology in counseling, ethics, and laws associated. And then we'll also look at some diversity and inclusion in the areas of distance counseling, distance education, and distance supervision. So looking at the use of technology and ethics, rehabilitation counseling, education, distance learning, this will also include some areas related to other codes of ethics in the field, such as MBCC's 2023 Code of Ethics and the American Counseling Association Code of Ethics, because they all kind of have different wordings, but it's kind of saying the same thing in many cases. So looking at that, use of technology and ethics of counselor education, looking at the ACA 2014 Code of Ethics in Distance Education, they say that integration of study and practice in traditional, hybrid, and or online formats. Counselor educators establish education and training programs that integrate academic study and supervised practice. So that applies to whether you are a rehabilitation counseling educator. They have similar wording in the CRCC. 2023 code of ethics related to that. Or if you look at the NBCC's 2023 code of ethics, similar, very similar wording there. So it has to basically be able to do online what it needs to do in person. So whether a person is getting the education from online or whether they get the education from in person, it needs to be comparable in terms of how the outcomes are for the students. Are they still getting those core competency areas? Something to consider. Now, looking specifically at CRC or CCRC education competencies, according to I-6A, it is a responsibility of the rehabilitation educator to either be competent in the use of educational means that are supported by technology or get the appropriate training to be competent. So again, this is what I said just a moment ago. The wording is different, but it's the same concept. So you have to be able to effectively utilize technology means in your educational endeavors. And looking at some research done by Mayer in 2015, they found that in a comparison between traditional on-campus classroom instruction and distance education in rehabilitation, counselor education, that there was no difference between the modalities the education was offered in and perceived skill acquisition of students. However, there is not a lot of research that is more current in this area, thus more research is needed. And that was noted by the authors and based on a search that I've done myself. It's really hard to find specific research related to specific areas of counseling. It tends to be, you can find research in various different fields even. Like you might find research related to best practices in telehealth or something in psychiatric research or social work research, but it doesn't appear to be one field having the monopoly on this research. And so if anybody is interested in this area to do research studies and to further it related to counseling specific stuff, feel free to do that and hit me up if you want to collaborate. I'm always up for doing collaborations with people, whether you're a practitioner, whether you are a scholar, whether you are an educator, researcher, whatever. That is always something that interests me. So looking next at distance supervision and the education and ethics areas. According to some research done in 2011, Minzo conducted research which examined video conference use and the supervision of individuals working towards their license. So they noted in their research that supervisors need to maintain appropriate knowledge and informed consent of clients, confidentiality, record keeping, and knowing about the boundaries in supervision. The researchers also suggest having a gatekeeping process that determines which students are eligible to video conference. This would be the same thing for if you have a supervisee that you're supervising towards a license or supervising in terms of certification area. Not everybody may be qualified in terms of their knowledge in the technology area or even their ability status and what they're capable of operating. So that is something to consider. Just like Um, this research um, says codes of ethics, whether it's ACA, whether it is NBCC, whether it is CRCC, they also say that supervisors are responsible for understanding these appropriate areas. So even though this research was done in 2011, the ethical codes still um, mirror this expectation. And then also looking at laws. Each state will have different laws that are that govern supervision and what supervisors can and cannot do, depending on whether it is university level supervision, whether it is licensing supervision, and so on. So that's something to keep in mind. Looking at other research done by Cisco in Cisco in 2014, they examined the building of effective online supervision and counselor training. The article discussed areas that an online supervisor, master's students in a counseling course has to keep in mind. For instance, in online counselor education, a supervisor still needs to be able to recognize and respond to the adult learner's needs. Also mentioned in Cisco's article was that counselors in training are being asked to perform new roles. Thus, having trainees perform multiple tasks help them learn to juggle the workplace demands placed on them, relating to roles such as advocacy and being social agents for change. So, looking at this area, I have spent my whole career in some form or fashion having online education as components of my educational classrooms through learning management systems. I've supervised doctoral students that were teaching assistants for me, and I've done practicum and internship through hybrid models and fully online models, as well as pre-practicum. And so these expectations of new roles, looking at this in terms of distance supervision, distance counseling, distance education, this is becoming more and more embedded in terms of everything in the counseling field. Now, most employers are expecting students of programs to be able to utilize distance counseling for their roles or distance supervision for their roles. Even in terms of education, as we mentioned earlier, as an educator, you're expected to be able to teach in any format. So these are becoming more and more embedded in our profession at the state level, at the local levels, at the work levels, everywhere. So it's here to stay. I know at multiple institutions where I've worked, I've helped build input for having telehealth as part of the training process. I know in my current role, we have that in our program. We do not have a course specific to it yet, but we have it to where students must learn about it through our university or another means, such as getting formal training through NBCC or the American Counseling Association, and so on. And so, again, we see this more and more embedded. I know for my current position and other positions that I've been in as well, I have virtual office hours where I meet with students, or I have appointments with students related to course materials or feedback, or even sometimes as part of an assignment, they meet with me to discuss things through this the Zoom platform that we use. So technology in terms of being an area for advocacy, and the means for that is becoming more and more as well, because you can then have different components such as, let's say, advisory boards, where you have community members coming in even in the supervision process, or looking at looking at stakeholder claims in terms of how programs are going, and all these different areas. Um, so it's interesting to see this evolution from something that was once um, not as embedded into things as it is turning out to be now. Um, and so, looking at, whoops, sorry, ahead of myself. Um, Looking at some of the other areas of distance education in Louisiana specifically, there's a board of regents that defines what on an academic affairs policy that defines what a distance education course is in higher education. Looking at what is accepted protocol in order to be part of the Commission on Colleges of the Southern Association of Schools Commissions on Occupations, and so other states probably have their own areas as well in terms of what this looks like. I know there was recent change in the Department of Education in terms of regulations related to online programs in counselor education across the board. And we just had a department meeting in my program where we were discussing this change, in which the Department of Education now is wanting programs to provide the different state level courses that students can meet to be able to be licensed in different states and be able to get that education from their program in every area. So in my institution, we have students in all 50 states. We even have students, I believe, that are international in our program as well. And so this regulation actually creates some issues for us. And so that is something to consider going forward, that this is an area of concern in the counseling profession, perhaps, in terms of how this will look. And I am noticing with the transcript that it's not getting everything completely noted correctly, and for that I apologize. I thought it was be better than that. But looking at some best practices in counselor education and counselor education and learning, according to the American Counseling Association, the National Board for Certified Counselors, and the Rehabilitation Counselor Certification Codes of Ethics, counselor educators must be certain that they have the competency to develop and teach in all forms. Keep in mind the demographics of your learners, such as age, socioeconomic status, ability status, race, and cultural identities. Have different modalities of assessments, quizzes, written assignments, exams, possibly that grade themselves, that have multiple attempts, have group work. Provide ways for students to communicate with one another. For example, virtual student lounges. I've had that in several of my classrooms. Provide scaffoldings of expectations through examples of assignments, real-world resources, videos. Whatever learning management system that is being used, also known as LMS, make sure you provide both written expectations and have videos going over those expectations whenever possible. Have regular communications with learners via email, appointments by phone or video conferencing, announcements, and feedback. I actually also incorporate audio feedback in addition to written feedback, in addition to annotated feedback when I give feedback to my students. And they often commented on how thankful they are of this. This source of information for these practices came from Simonson et al. 2019. Sorry, actually had some more on supervision. And so we'll go back to that slide. I had it in the wrong order accidentally. When using technology in supervision, counselors, supervisors are confident in the use of these technologies. So supervisors take the time necessary precautions to protect the confidentiality, as we noted before. This was noted in all of the codes of ethics I mentioned before. And you want to make sure that you have a business associates agreement. This is outlined between you and whatever carrier or platform that you are utilizing for your supervision. This is the same thing for if you're an educator in your online programs, and it's the same thing for if you are a counselor providing practicing telemental health. You have to have a business associates agreement that outlines how a service provider protects data. For example, electronically stored supervision notes, if it's progress notes in terms of counseling sessions and looking at different areas related to diagnoses, student information related to supervision in the online programs. How is this data kept safe from hackers? And what happens if that data gets hacked? What happens in terms of how the service providers will remedy that? So, of course, when it comes to the university setting, you'll have to worry about FERPA as well, and making sure that the student information is protected in the ways that it needs to be protected as well. So that is one aspect of providing safeguards. Other options or areas to consider include having antivirus software, anti-malware, anti-ransomware, and so on, and going through cybersecurity training. I know at my institution we have multiple cybersecurity trainings that we go through, as well as we're offered the opportunity to additional courses to get cybersecurity training certifications. So again, these are all areas to consider whether the supervision is done for a licensed person working towards their license, working in a university setting, and so on. This information is from this last bit of information regarding business associates agreements and cybersecurity protections and so on that I just noted was from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So this is, you need to follow the law. You need to make sure it's not just an ethical consideration, but a lawful one as well. So looking a little more at research related to supervision areas, it was research conducted by an author that I honestly think I would butcher the name for, so I'm not going to really try. It's Anagastopoulou et al. 2015. they conducted research related to doctoral students who were receiving supervision in primarily distance learning formats and found that those students were moderately satisfied with their experience. There were significant differences in gender satisfaction. Males had statistically significant results in their views of their online supervisors. So this means this was very unlikely due to chance. Males rated their supervisors higher in the following areas versus females. Participants that said that their supervisors were providing clear direction, supervisor being a role model, being responsive, supportive, and interested in the individual. So males rated supervisors higher in those areas. Students who were in blended learning formats were more satisfied than students who received supervision and education from primary distance learning formats. So blended formats, you can also view this as in different ways. Sometimes it will be, sometimes it's referred to as a hybrid format, but blended formats can have, for instance, asynchronous and synchronous components to the education, all online, or they can have a residency portion where they might go for an intensive 2 or 3 days in person, and then the rest is between asynchronous and synchronous formats. So when it's something like that, where students have engagement with the professor and other students and other supervisees, they feel more involved in this process. And in this particular study, many students who participated in it reported feeling isolated and forgotten about. So that's an interesting thing to consider when it comes to online aspects of supervision. So looking at this as well in terms of lawful aspects, McAdams and Watt in 2010 conducted research, and the results revealed that a lot of states are either discussing legislation or have legislation related to online counseling supervision programs. So you're definitely seeing more and more of this with the recent Department of Education regulations and rules that are taking effect July 1st. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend checking that out. I believe there was, I think it was either Cosima Iota, CSI. I think they put out a webinar that they're going to be exploring this area in the future. I think that was them that did it. So if you're a member of them, check that out. I highly recommend it if you're interested in this. So again, keep in mind that you have to be ethical, you have to be lawful, your programs have to be lawful, you have to be minded of this and all of this. And then each state will have their different regulations and certifications by the state boards related to use of technology and supervision for licensure advancements and supervision. For instance, in Louisiana, where I live, according to current rules, all the 100 hours required for PLPCs, which is the provisionally licensed professional counselor working towards their license, can be supervised in terms of in distance formats with HIPAA compliant platforming. So that is some food for thought. So now we will, look at some best practices in, the CRCC 2023 Codes of Ethics and other codes of ethics in distance counseling. So looking at this, looking at specifically the CRCC Code of Ethics 2023, K1, Competence and Legal Considerations, and the areas of K1A and K1B, CRCs must make sure that they are knowledgeable in the use of technology. Further, CRCs must make sure that they understand one size does not fit all, and not everyone will be suitable um, uh, for the use of technology um, when it comes to different areas, such as distance counseling and telehealth counseling. This is also noted um, in other codes of ethics in other ways, such as the National Board for Certified Counselors 2023 Code of Ethics and the American Counseling Association 2014 Code of Ethics. Furthermore, all the codes of ethics that I just mentioned say that technology-based services are not to be the only option for the clients. So even if you want to provide telehealth services, they have to have an alternative means of being able to be provided services. I know I am a registered service provider um, at the federal level, and in my uh, in my disclosure statement there, to be able to be a provider at the federal level, such as if I wanted to do Medicare option um, as a provider, I have to have a physical address where they can come to if they need services provided in person. And also for business purposes, you cannot have a PO box that you are listing as your business. So keep that in mind. That's a federal law. Um, and so they have to have another option in terms of that. Some people might refer to putting into their informed consent that a referral process may be noted or considered with the client if they feel like they would be better served in person. Um, and so this may be an option, but you also have to check with federal regulations and state regulations and your state board specifically if you're considering something like that. So that is definitely something to keep in mind for future um, notes in terms of this. So there's a lot to keep in mind here. It's like I used to tell um, students and even other professionals, you know, when it comes to some of this stuff, it's like I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but there's a lot of things to consider that might scare people when it comes to this stuff. And so, I hope that you find this very helpful. And if you're considering these areas or you're already practicing in these areas, keep these things in mind in terms of food for thought. So in terms of CRCC's 2023 Code of Ethics in Informed Consent, when it comes to virtual counseling, or telehealth counseling, telemental health counseling, there are different areas of informed consent that you have to note. One, risk and benefits of engaging in the use of technology-based virtual counseling. Two, type of technology, possibility of technology failure, and alternate methods of service delivery, such as in-person service delivery, or if technology fails, will you have a phone call session, for instance? If there needs to be emergencies, what does that look like? What are for instance, in Louisiana, we have to note, we have to find out what are the nearest emergency rooms that individuals have around them. What is the local emergency phone numbers for the local sheriff's office and things like that. Those things need to be noted in the client's file. anticipated response times in terms of boundary issues, right? Um, when are you available from what time to what time to be able to respond? How many hours will it take? And even looking at stuff like this applies in educational institutions, right? And it also applies in supervision stuff. You should have these things noted. Um, procedures to follow when you're not available, referral information for client emergencies, time zone differences, culture and or language differences that may affect the delivery of services. These things should be discussed. These things should be taken into consideration, and um, and then also possible denial of insurance claims and or benefits. You know, you might not think about this, and this is where the law comes into play. Right? In certain states, for instance, I'm licensed in Nebraska, and for Medicare telemental health servicing there, and I believe even for just in general, um, audio sessions, such as being on the phone, and text sessions where you're like synchronously in real time um, telephonic sessions um, are not billable in that state. So that's something to consider. Any limitations due to services provided across jurisdictions? You know, we have that counseling compact that's happening, and there's many states going on. I think it's up to 40 now, 40 different states that have signed on to it, something along the lines of that. Um, and so when that comes into play, I think it's they're formulating that in 2024, and they will start issuing interstate compact licensings in I think 2025, from what I understand. Um, so how will that affect this aspect of any limitations due to service providing across jurisdictions? Um, and any policies related to social media use. We'll get into some of that social media use aspect in a little bit. So these are again a lot of areas to consider, a lot of food for thought, um, and and uh, and so looking further at more things to consider, according to the American Counseling Association's Code of Ethics, knowledge of and compliance with standards. So you have to make sure that you're responsible, you have the responsibility to read. Oh, this is also in the NBCC Code of Ethics and the CRCC Code of Ethics. You have to, you're basically responsible for reading, understanding, and following Code of Ethics and applicable laws and regulations, and making sure that you have continuing education um, to be informed in the different areas you need to be informed. For instance, I recently went through the NBCC's 9-hour board certified telemental health training program to be qualified to sit for the board certified telemental health uh, counseling exam to become certified in that area. So that's something that I'm doing in order to um, gain more practice, to gain more specialty. And that's another area looking at the appropriate education, training, and supervised experience. So in my career, I've been supervised in the online um, delivery of supervision, uh, looking at these different areas related to the counselor education aspects and so on. And I've received the education. I continue to do that and provide the education as well in this area. So that way I'm keeping up to date on the different areas of need. Um, and something that is in all the codes of ethics as well is permission to record. So before you record any session with clients, before you record any supervision session or educational session, you need to have consent to record those individuals. Generally, for the purposes of supervision, you would want to have something like this in your supervision contract. The same thing, you would want to have this in your informed consent if you needed to record the sessions for any reason. You would also want the client to verbally and um, uh, have a signature, either a wet signature or electronic signature, or wet signature is actual paper signature, or an electronic signature if it is accepted. Um, in terms of that, for the counseling and supervision, um, for the educational aspects of recording, generally that's something that would be done where the students would agree to it as part of the educational process, so they would sign off on that there. But that is very important because it's a law. It's not just ethical. It's something you have to follow by law. Um, and so, looking at other things, let's see. If you are utilizing testing in an online manner, whether this is through counseling, supervision, education, you make sure that you are trained in these areas to give these assessments and to interpret these assessments, and make sure that the assessments that you're giving in the online format are going to be valid and reliable in terms of what they're measuring, and also are they measuring it consistently and it's meaning the same thing in the online format. So that's another area to consider. So a lot of ethics and lawful things here as well. And so next, we'll look at some best practices in distance counseling. So this was adapted from the American Psychiatric Association, American Telemental Health Association, Telemedicine Association's best practices in video conferencing based telemental health, 2018. But again, this really is something that you will need to pay attention to across, whether it's in the counseling field or not, because there are laws related to this kind of stuff as well. You want to make sure that if you're going to have a telemental health component of your business, whether it's through an agency, whether it's through your own business, that you want to conduct a needs assessment, and you include your program statement, delivered services, population to be served, your needed technology, provider resources, staffing needs, safety and quality control, business and regulatory processes, space requirements, and program evaluations. And then looking at some of the legal, ethical, and professional considerations. If a provider chooses to provide services in another state to a patient or a client, they must have a license and ideally malpractice insurance in state of the residence in the state of residence of the patient or client. So if you are licensed in Louisiana, but a client that you have wants to be seen in, let's say, one lives in, let's say, Mississippi, lawfully, you cannot provide services for that client. And it's unethical as well in that manner. So something to consider about laws. And this is from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 2024. And so you have to make sure that you are, paying attention to the federal laws. Uh, Again, I know it can be scary, but here we are. So, looking at more at what the Department of Health and Human Services says, um, if providing services through a federal agency such as the Veterans Affairs, Medicare, Department of Defense, for instance, the provider should adhere to licensing requirements of that agency, which may have a set of rules that pertains across several states. And then also, if there is an interstate compact, the counseling compact, for instance, that is going to be taking effect in 2025, providers may use that, provided that state laws in which the client resides are followed. So, so again, these are ethical things to consider and then lawful things to consider. So again, we touched this before, but again, I want to reiterate informed consent. When obtaining informed consent, electronic signatures may be used if it is allowed in the jurisdiction. And then standards of operations and procedures, looking at the client should be made aware of hours of operations, times of operations, communicates the messages. So again, the codes of ethics say that, but I reiterate it here because the law says that as well. Emergency protocols and roles should be noted. You want to make sure that there are agreements which provide the client with pertinent information about the credentialing of the provider. So this is something that's also said in ethics. So you cannot, let's say, call yourself a doctor in the counseling field if you have a doctorate in business or a doctorate in education that is not, let's say, an MED in counseling. A education doctorate in counseling, for instance. So make sure that you are providing your true credentialing and qualifications related on the areas that you are trying to work. And so this helps to provide a way to have quality assurance management of the services provided. So make sure that also patient-provider identification is there. So all persons should be identified before sessions begin. If a patient is being detained, for instance, then permission should not be asked. So if they have some kind of, let's say, involuntary committal or something like that you've got permission for. Looking at beginning the session, you should provide name and credentials of the provider, location of the patient, immediate contact for both provider and patient, phone, text, email, contact for relevant support people, professionals, and family, expectations of contact between sessions. And I really want to look at that expectations of contact between sessions aspect. Boundary issues are paramount to consider. So you should define that in your informed consent. For emergencies, make sure that you should be competent, be able to work with local staff, administration, and other authorities. So you need to know those local numbers and determine all the rules, emergency contacts protocol, and be aware of safety procedures if clients exhibit strong affect or behavioral displays during the session. So looking at looking at some other ethical areas to consider, make sure that you are utilizing appropriate HIPAA compliant, high-tech compliant software with business associated agreements such as Zoom for Mental Health, Doxy.me, Google Meet, Nuna, if they have a business associates agreement. I cannot stress that enough. Um, and um, and then make sure that you're following state laws, federal laws related to that, and appropriate versus inappropriate counseling modalities. So that will differ across states, what the states require you. Again, we kind of talked about that. Um, and states might have their own noted areas of need for education in telehealth providing, and the rules that authorize you to be able to practice telehealth in that state will vary. I know, for instance, um, currently Louisiana uh, allows for 3 hours of continuing education in telehealth in order to be a provider in this state. It used to be 9 hours to be a provider, and you had to continue on with 9 hours. But then they took it down to 3. That could change, and that could always vary. Um, and so that is something to consider. So again, in terms of the state level here, it has to be synchronous, live telehealth therapy sessions using tele-assisted media such as telephonic or video conferencing through computers and mobile devices. The use of asynchronous modalities, email, chatting, texting, fax are not appropriate and shall not be used for teletherapy except for in crisis to ensure the client's safety in Louisiana specifically. Again, that will vary um, per state, and so that's something to consider. Um, and so, looking next at the CRCC 2023 and other codes of ethics in terms of use of social media, because and boundary issues. This is a scary area, I would say. My major professor was Dr. Theodore Remley, and I just I kind of remember, certain things where he would be like, just don't do this, don't do that, to be on the safe side. I kind of find when it comes to social media and counseling and mixing the two together, don't do it. But that's what I would say, honestly. But again, how you approach this, you need to look at the codes of ethics. You need to look at federal and state laws. And according to ACA 2014 Code of Ethics, MDCC's 2023 Code of Ethics, and the CRCC's 2023 Code of Ethics, along with along with these different codes of ethics, there shall be written policy outlining the use of social media. There will be written policy which outlines how confidential client information will not be disclosed, and related to how multiple relationships and boundary crossings and violations will not occur. So you have to specifically outline how this will not happen. Along with this, counselors will not follow or try to accept friendships from clients on social media. Counselors must educate clients on the risks of sending messages through technology and social media. For instance, being hacked. How do you know you're sending the information to who you're sending it to? In this day and age, cyber hackers and criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated with mimicking other people that they have hacked. So while you think you might be emailing somebody something that is confidential, You might not be emailing them at all. You could be emailing somebody that hacked that person's information. Or if someone else hacked another person's phone, how do you know that you are texting this other person? How do you verify that? Right? Um, so something to consider. Even if you're messaging through social media, text messages, or emails, right? Um, so again, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but um, food for thought. Have you ever had one of those little pop-ups that says, "Do you know this person?" And it was your client on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whichever one it might be. I have. In my doctoral program, I had that happen to me. I've had even situations where students in programs where I was teaching at and I was supervising were going on to social media and looking at my profiles, trying to send me friend requests. So I've had that at the supervision level. And so these are different areas to consider. You know, if you have a social media presence, how are you differentiating your business persona from your personal life? If you're advertising through social media, how are you ensuring that you're not mixing personal with business endeavors? If you're posting information on social media, such as any kind of political views or religious views or whatever else it may be, how do you know that other people, such as your students, your clients, your supervisees, do not see that information? And if they do see that information, how do you know that that's not going to affect them? What they think about you, what they think about the services you're providing. Those are different areas of consideration as well. So, looking next at um, uh, some diversity and inclusion in telehealth, make sure that clients seeking telehealth services are screened. This is in your codes of ethics as well. So making sure that they fit with cognitive capabilities, physical requirements. Can they operate this equipment on their own or with reasonable accommodations? This is in the CRCC Code of Ethics. This is in the NBCC's Code of Ethics. And so is there a problem with the client? Is the problem the client is seeking help for suitable for counseling through telehealth health, or is it more serious? Um, is it something that cannot be addressed in telehealth? An area of consideration also would be if the person who's seeking services, again, could they physically operate the equipment they needed from their location to be able to attend the sessions? With the reasonable accommodations, this is actually also part of information from the Department of Health and Human Services, as well as ethical considerations. So you have to be lawful and mindful related to those accommodation needs. Um, are other areas considered as well, such as are they living in a rural area? Do they have language barriers? Again, you need to always consider these aspects. And oh, sorry, uh, my information there was going haywire when I was trying to um, go to the next area. So, looking at some laws, I know that I am starting to run out of time from what I'm seeing. So looking at um, some of the laws. Let me just double check the time here. I'll just share my screen for a moment. So looking at the laws of high tech and HIPAA. First, we'll look at HIPAA. So HIPAA is the Health Insurance Protection, Portability, and Accountability Act. This is from the CDC, Center for Disease Control. HIPAA is concerned with how clients and patients' personal information, health information, is protected, shared, and accounted for. And looking at this the slide here is designed for security officials, designed for security management systems, identity workforce access needs, restricted information access, security awareness training, and many other areas. And so there's a lot of stuff to consider when it comes to HIPAA. And so again, I don't want to scare you, but it is part of your ethical duties to understand this and lawful duties to look at these different areas. Versus the HITECH Act. This is a federal act that looks at health information technology for economic and clinical health. That's the actual name of the act. This is concerned with how electronic health records are stored and transferred. So if you're doing telehealth services, are they being protected with encryption, for instance, things like that? Do you have antivirus technology? Are you transmitting it properly through a data transfer service that has a business associates agreement? And does it detail everything? This is where that all comes into play. So it's not just ethical, it is lawful as well here. And so you have to consider these different areas: technological safeguards, physical safeguards, administrative safeguards, privacy rules, reasonable safeguards for all the electronic personal health information, access control, audit control, integrity, person or entity authentication, transmission security, facility access, who has access to this, workstation use, workstation security, device media, so many things to consider when it comes to this area. Security management process, do you have a security officer? What is your workforce security in terms of information access? So many different things to consider in this area, and it can be very, very scary. But it's something you need to consider when it comes to telehealth. And so looking at this other area, looking at HIPAA, high tech, and ethics, and looking at HIPAA, high tech, and ethics, there's all those things to consider. So it melds together. You have these ethical things saying be this way as a counselor, then you have the federal laws, the federal acts, the state acts, the state laws that adhere to the federal laws. So it's all melding into one, so to speak. So looking at some of the research examining high tech and HIPAA. The personal health information is defined as individually or personal identifiable health information, according to Wilkinson and Reinhardt 2015, that is transmitted by or maintained in electronic media or any other medium, with the exception of educational or employment records. Um, so educational records, that would be under FERPA, right? And so uh, and employment records, that is covered under another area as well. So individually identifiable health information is specified as information including demographic data that relates to the individual's past, present, or future physical or mental health or condition. The provision of health care to the individual, or the past, present, or future payment for the provision of health care to the individual, and that identifies the individual for which there is reasonable basis to believe can be used to identify the individual. Individually identifiable health information includes many common identifiers as well. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, examples could be admission dates, street names, vehicle identifiers, internet protocols, addresses, biometric identifiers, and photographs. Reasonable protections should be in place and may include technologies such as appropriate firewalls, passwords protection, and encryption. Many states, according to Wilkinson again in Reinhardt 2015, Reinhardt 2015, many states may have their own privacy laws that need to be considered as well. And then I had that slide out of order earlier, looking at some HIPAA, high tech, and ethics. According to the ACA 2014 Code of Ethics standards, ethical counselors are expected to understand the laws and statutes of the uniqueness of confidentiality and the proper use of security regarding those. So again, there's the ethical aspects. Wording on that is also in the CRCC 2023 Code of Ethics and the NBCC's 2023 Code of Ethics. Regardless of where you're looking, it is there. And then according to the Department of Health and Human Services, the use of business associates agreement, again, should be utilized in relation to protected health information. This includes training programs in clinical supervision and with clients. So it's all over the place. You have to make sure that you're utilizing those business associates agreement. They drill it into you. And then also, just for food for thought, the Office of Civil Rights is something you can check out. U.S. Office Department is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that gives you more information regarding HIPAA and some of these and the business associates agreements, and gives you some examples of ones that they have kind of skimmed and scanned that may have business associates agreements. However, they have not vetted them all themselves in terms of specifics of them. And some that they say can be utilized in terms of platforms for supervision, clinical, and then supervision, educational, clinical stuff is UpDocs, VC, which is VSEE, Zoom for Healthcare, Doxy.me, Google G Suite Hangouts Meets, Cisco WebEx Meetings, WebEx Teams, Amazon Chime, GoToMeeting, Spruce Healthcare Messenger. And then this policy could change at different times, right? They had suspensions of different HIPAA violations going on during the COVID nationwide public health emergency that has since gone on to change back to more stringent policies. So you want to make sure that you're keeping up with these aspects. So check that out. This is the end of my presentation. It's been a pleasure. If you would like a copy of my references, My email is Dustin underscore Reed, REED, at yahoo.com. You can also email, you can also get my email off of ARCA's website if you want to contact me to chat with me about anything that was in this presentation. Again, it's an honor to be your treasurer. It's been an honor to do this presentation. I hope you find this information uh, useful and have a lovely day, everyone.